being a part of a community is complicated. And I think a lot of people expect you as a black or a brown person to put that on your back at all times. I don't think that white people are sort of expected to have that on them at all times, and I think for me, being a part of a community means sort of talking about, the black and brown, queer and trans folk that sort of raised me to make the music I make, talking about the black and brown women who are sort of at the back of everything, talking about vulnerability and accountability. And I think like that can be enough sometimes. I think it doesn't need to be a big thing, but it also does need to be big in your life.
Este es el podcast de Ruidosa Caracola con Eric Mujica.
Bienvenidos y prepárense para una explosión cultural de hip hop, jazz, funk y también que incluye un llamado de atención, un llamado a la acción de lo que ha vivido la raza afroamericana durante los últimos años, décadas en Estados Unidos, pero con mucha más atención en lo que ha sucedido en los últimos años. Tengo al gran McKinley Dixon desde Chicago, un artista que en serio se está encargando de explotarme la cabeza con todo su material y con su nuevo material que se llama Run, Run, Run. McKinley Dixon, welcome to the podcast of Ruidosa Caracola.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
As we speak and as I was listening to your music and not just your latest single, also your latest album, where that jazz influence comes from. It's a lot of jazz, but experimental jazz and also the hip hop that comes from your part of your voice, your letters, and your rhythm, and how you manage or how you balance these rhythms.
So I actually first started by listening to genres that weren't rap music. I started listening to punk music, pop punk music. I started listening to a little bit of jazz, but I sort of went through my life in different phases and different eras to get to the jazz where I'm at now. So I listened to bands back in the day that were sort of challenging their own gender identities and doing like really crazy theatrical stuff. And then I was like, this is great, but there's not enough storytelling for me. There's not enough instrumentation. So then I started listening to hip hop music more. And then from there, I was like, oh, here's the storytelling aspect of it. Now that I can tell stories, now that I have these ideas that are theatrical and stuff, what am I missing? So then it sort of became like, oh, I need to do jazz. Jazz is the last thing I'm missing because that's more instrumental based. So then I started focusing on instrumentals at the end of all of this. And that's how the jazz sort of came into the storytelling, the themes, and the lyrics.
But you are using jazz as a very important part of your sound. I mean, the real heavy jazz. Is not this club jazz. It's very heavy jazz, and the interesting part of all your music is you're making everything, all the elements, hip hop, jazz, also the funk elements. You're making very friendly, but also the message behind all these stories and also being real. How all these you have this crazy cultural instrumentation, but in your part lyrically you are very real and as the story goes.
Thank you. Yeah, I honestly just take moments that I see and I just sort of try to write them as beautifully as I can. Like if I see something that inspires me, it'll probably be like a tiny moment and it will probably only be like 4 lines. But if I'm inspired by it enough, I just try to make it from the perspective of, okay, now how can this be written if I am the viewer, if I'm the person living it, and if I'm the person watching this whole thing back? 3 different perspectives that sort of come together to make these songs really like dramatic in what they are lyrically.
In your latest single, "Run, Run, Run," you have this piano playing in a very I think pop jazzy way, but lyrically is a heavy song.
Yeah.
It shows the reality that the use of guns and all these crazy things that not just happening in the United States, also in many countries around the world. How you get influenced by this, the news, the day to day life, especially in the black community. How you take this flag, I mean, to take the message to everyone.
Yeah, so it's really interesting because I think a lot of people hear my music and they sort of think that it is this big, sort of this big message that's directed at everybody. And I think that's the beauty of my music is in actuality, I sort of see the things that me and my loved ones are going through, and I put it through this lens that then makes it so not just I am the one that is reciting and people are listening. I think an artist does a great job when they find the in between. So there's three types of artists for me: the artist that is the one telling the story and you're watching it, then there's the artist that puts you in their shoes and you're experiencing it. But I try to be the artist that's like, we are both sitting together in the backseat of this car as it's about to happen, you know? And I think that sort of then is felt by everyone everywhere, you know, because you're right, gun violence, and especially the death of people due to gun violence, is not specifically Black American, you know? And it's like, there are communities that I have seen that are brown that are going through the same thing, you know what I mean? Here, South America, other countries. And I think that these communities sort of identify with it because it's not just them listening and me talking. It's sort of we're all sitting there as this is about to happen.
And when the moment of you're feeling all these all the situations, all this happening over the gun violence in this particular theme. But when you have these things that could be very close to you, and then try to musically bring all these elements, this the jazz, the fusion, and also the horns, the all the instrumentation that also has in your album, for my mama and anyone who look like her, is just a storytelling after story after story after story. And as I was hearing the whole album, is this is a perfect, it could be a perfect song for movies or for series that could be very tied to these situations. You look at your songs as a theatrical themes, as a something that could be a soundtrack, or make the song the biggest as you can.
All the time. Yeah, I mean, so I animate now, but that just pretty much means that I sort of grew up on watching like a Naruto fight scene while Linkin Park is like put over it. You know what I mean? Like those are the things that I sort of like came up on. So for me as an adult, now it's like, oh, I can just make those myself with my music and my visuals. And I think I've sort of now has me being like, oh, I can make like a string arrangement if I want to. I just really got to try. You know, it's like I can make all of these stories happen to just soul piano, soul harp if I really, really put my intention behind it, you know? So it all came from watching Naruto AMVs growing up, pretty much. Yeah.
And also that challenge of making a version that you want, or add the instrumentation that you want, is that what you did in your latest single? You have these two versions of "Run, Run, Run." Why do you want to show these two versions? Why do you want to show to yourself also?
I think that it was just, I had never been able to make a song and then perform it live so quickly. And I think it was just really beautiful to sort of record these versions and then have like the mastered, like the radio version that everyone loves in here, and then sort of have the live version where we just sort of put it together a couple days. Shouts out to my bassist Cav, who put it all together in a couple of days and just made these really, really beautiful arrangements for our live stuff.
Now, as you talking about the live performance of these songs and also all of your songs, how you manage to play them live? If there is a part of the musician that really wants to bring all the instruments live
Yeah.
as just to as an artistic part of the creativity, but how you manage to bring these songs live? Do you make a different versions? You make a band? How you manage to do that?
Yeah, so it's actually, I just bring a band on the road. I have a drum, bass, and keys, and that's really a lot of the instrumentation on my record. Plus, my bassist played on most of the songs, so he's the musical director for my live stuff. And I think also him sort of coming from a gospel church background has allowed him to really be like, well, how can I make these songs big, based off the record, but also based off of what I know from playing on them and what I know of McKinley.
And that and how's your what is your background? You were just talking about your one of your band members as a coming from church. What is your background to to develop all this music?
So I grew up also in the church, but in a different way. My music came from me growing up in two places, from growing up in New York, but also growing up in Maryland, which are two very different places demographically, location wise, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, my music sort of comes from this sense of longing, longing for a place I fit in, longing for a community that is there forever, longing to bring people back to life, and I think my background is sort of this idea of like being a poet in a way, but not knowing what that meant until I found the words for it.
It's very cool to consider yourself as a poet because you are in your
Thank you.
music. You can feel it. I think there are music that uh, I don't know. You just knew when the artist is very deep into his art, into his
Thank
music,
you.
and in your case, I have the opportunity to listen very carefully your latest album and also your new single and your music as a continuation of what is been what you've been doing and it's also with the evolution of a sound and also getting deeper in the situations and your surroundings as a part of the community. What do you think, or how much do you think that an artist should be involved in the artist and his music should be involved in the community nowadays?
I think that it's really hard to, I think that people think being a part of a community is easy, and I think being a part of community is not necessarily hard as well. I think you do have to show up. There are definitely moments where you will feel invalidated because of the lack of people who are a part of where you're going and what you're doing. But at the same time, you sort of have to be aware that everybody has their own thing going on, which leads me to be like, well, now that means I can sort of give a little bit of lenience and grace to people who are not directly involved with me. Being a part of a community is complicated. And I think a lot of people expect you as a black or a brown person to put that on your back at all times. I don't think that white people are sort of expected to have that on them at all times, and I think for me, being a part of a community means sort of talking about, the black and brown, queer and trans folk that sort of raised me to make the music I make, talking about the black and brown women who are sort of at the back of everything, talking about vulnerability and accountability. And I think like that can be enough sometimes. I think it doesn't need to be a big thing, but it also does need to be big in your life.
just part of the inspiration to make music, and also the evolution as a musician. In talking about the music, just leaving aside for a moment the lyrical aspect, and how or where are your inspiration musically? What artists do you hear nowadays that could be inspiration or find some elements to add to your music? Because nowadays we just open the platform and we just get music from all over the world easily.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
nowadays, how is your way to be an audience, not just the musician, and how you behave as an audience.
Yeah, I'm actually still working on that. I think that it never really ends, especially when you make music, just because I hear artists now and I'm sort of very critical, and there's no need for me to be. I think I'm just that because of where I'm at. So I'm sort of working on this in between of not being critical but also enjoying it. You know what I mean? I don't know. I think I draw a lot of inspiration, less so mainly from rappers recently and more so from like bands that are international in a way. I really love this band. Combo Chimbita is really great from New York. This band Otoboke Beaver from Japan. A lot of sort of elements from places that I haven't been yet and places that I haven't seen the sun touch. So I'm trying to be less of a critical rap enjoyer.
And the critical part of as a musician with other music, but the part of your critic of your own music, how much of that takes you before you release something, or share it to anyone? How you take the critical part of being an artist with your own art?
Honestly, I'm not too critical now anymore. Like I think that I mean a lot of people are coming into my discography at For My Mama, but before For My Mama, I released about 3 records, and all of those were just sort of on my own accord. I think the good thing is I've learned that a slow burn sort of staves off the imposter syndrome because now I'm sitting at this point where it's like I think I have a good grasp on what's tight and what's not, and if it works for me, then all of this is really for me. All of this is for me, and people can enjoy it, and I love that. But I think that mainly these albums are for me to process.
Is an artist making your own art, because it takes time to find your own sound, your own way to tell the story, to tell sing a song, and make a. I think by now in your years as an artist, you already found a sound, and it takes time. It takes a lot of sweat and dedication, and to get out to a point where you are not too critical with your own music is a very happy place to be, because
Truly,
you're just feeling great and fine and comfortable with what you are doing now that you are not just we are very close to you to release of your new album. I think it's June the 2nd.
June 2nd. Yeah, June 2nd.
And what are your expectations for this new material?
Because I sort of love the music I make, I don't really have an expectation about the amount of records that's sold. I don't really have an expectation about how far it reaches. I sort of just am like, does everybody that hear it feel loved? Do they feel loved after it plays? Do they feel loved during it? Do they hear the love that's been put into it? So I could still have the same amount of people listening, and as long as there's sort of that validation, then it's fine with me. I've been doing it all my life, so.
It's great to hear that we are having your music for a long, long time, and we are expecting that new record. We are waiting for June the 2nd, and thank you very much for being here, for talking about music, your music, and your surroundings. It's very nice to show that to the world, and thank you very much. And any last words for the podcast?
Bring me out to Argentina. Everybody who's listening, bring me out. Bring me out.
I am going to take care of that. I'm doing it. Your music is awesome, and McKinley, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to talk to you and to know you and to find your music. I think it's great when you hear a new artist and you are just keeping playing and playing and playing and playing and playing and playing it. And that feeling of found new music is, I think, is the way that we keep loving making it, hearing it, and doing it. Thank you once again, McKinley. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Ahí estaba McKinley Dixon desde Chicago, también uniendo con Buenos Aires, con este ecuatoriano, para Ruidosa Caracola. En serio les digo, escuchen McKinley Dixon, todo. Tómenlo como tarea, tómenlo como deber, y en el próximo episodio les tomo la lección. Yo soy Eric Mujica, yo los quiero, adiós.
Ruidosa Caracola es una producción de Tripea. Suscríbete, compártelo y escucha nuestro playlist en Spotify.